All right, welcome everyone to the Irrigation Contractor Club podcast. My name is Pete, and today I'm joined by who has been described to me as the GOAT of training, Mr. Jeffrey Knight. Jeffrey, thanks so much for being here today.
Yes, thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into it. Why don't you tell me a bit about your background, how you got into irrigation, and what your role in the industry has been over the past couple decades?
Okay. Well, I did not get into irrigation on purpose, and I don't know very many people that do get into irrigation on purpose unless they were born into it somehow, some way. But uh, I am from a small town in Texas called Quanah, Texas. And the only thing that you irrigate in Quanah, Texas, the only thing I knew about irrigation was moving aluminum pipes. Uh, like I would work for some farmers or something, and we would move aluminum pipes when they would row irrigate the fields. And our football field had an aluminum pipe and a big impact head, and that was it. No one had. I didn't even know anything about irrigation. So I go to college at West Texas State, which is West Texas A&M now, which is in Canyon, Texas. So up in the panhandle of Texas. And a professor at at WT asked if anybody wanted a part-time job. And like an idiot, me and my roommate, we raised our hands and we were like, yeah, we need to work. And this professor put in sprinkler systems on Tuesdays and Thursdays when he wasn't professing up at the college. And that was my introduction into sprinkler systems was that. So that was in 1990. So I've been doing this for whatever that math comes out to be, 33 years. So that was my first system was in 1990. And I swore I'd never do that stuff again. I was I remember one day the guy I worked for, his name was Mr. Tillinghast. He was telling me to fix a valve, and he was telling me kind of what went wrong with it and why I needed to do this and why we do that. And I remember saying, Mr. Tillinghast, you don't have to tell me why to do it. If you want me to dig, I'll go dig. If you want me to change the valve, I'll just tell me what to do and I'll go do it. I didn't mean that as a sign of disrespect. That's kind of how I was raised, honestly. You do what you're told, quit questioning everything. I was just too dumb to know that he was trying to train me, you know? Um, and maybe the student wasn't ready for the teacher because, again, in the back of my mind, I was like, there's no point in you telling me how to do this because I'm not going to be doing this when I graduate from college. So 4 years later, I graduate from college, and my degree is in biology and secondary education. So I get a job teaching high school down in Lubbock, Texas. And I quickly decided that after about a year and a half of teaching high school, I decided digging ditches was my true calling in life. And I I went and got out of school and started doing irrigation. Um, and it was interesting because when I did those first systems by myself, when I was working for Mr. Tillinghast, I knew kind of that I wasn't going to be doing this stuff anymore. But also in the back of my mind, I was like, well, how hard can this be? I could do this if I wanted to. And that first system I did in the summer, it really, what I was trying to do was just make some extra money. I didn't think I was going to quit teaching school. I was just going to make some extra money and then go back. But after the first time, I just called it quits at the school and started doing irrigation full time. And man, that first system I installed, it should have been installed in a day, 2 days tops. And it took me a week to put that thing in. And I was like, how is this taking me so long? I don't know what's going on here. But that is how I started it. And that's 1995 is when I got my irrigation license. So in Texas, we have a licensing program. And in order to get your license, you have to pass a state exam. That exam covers general installation, rules and regulations, backflow, design, and hydraulics. That state passing rate back in those days was 33%. And I did pass it my first time, not because I'm an irrigation genius at all. It's because I just got out of college. I just got out of teaching high school. And when I was teaching high school, I was writing lesson plans, and um, I was having to teach. I'm a biology major, but I was having to teach chemistry and physics. So I was studying my butt off every day. And so to study for an irrigation exam, I was in that academic practice of doing that. But in the field, I struggled. And I did not have a good mentor. Mr. Tillinghast lived a long ways away. And and when I moved down to Lubbock, I really didn't have that mentor to, at first, to kind of guide me on this installation. And also, I was kind of, I don't know if I was arrogant. I probably was, but I felt like asking somebody a question, I guess my pride got in the way, and I felt like, why would I ask the competition, this guy who's my competition, how to do something? I didn't want to show my cards that I was not knowing, that I didn't know what I was doing out there. So, man, I struggled. Those first few systems, I was lucky to break even. And it was sink or swim. And then eventually I figured it out. And then I started taking training classes, and it changed the whole thing for me. I remember taking my first class on electrical troubleshooting. That was the first class I took. It cut my repair time in half. I had no idea how to use a voltometer. It was the furthest thing from my mind. And this guy got up there, told me how to use a voltometer, told me how to troubleshoot the valve in the front yard from the controller in the garage using a voltometer. And it blew my mind. And it cut my repair time in half, which was another new lesson I had to learn, because now I was making half the money on my repairs because I started knowing things. And the more you learn, the faster you become, and probably you got to restructure your pricing, which is probably another conversation. But I got into the training game myself, I guess, from the start. My parents were school teachers. I am in college. My degree's in secondary education. I did teach high school. I actually liked teaching high school, but my starting salary was $19,000. So I knew that was not going to be a sustainable pathway for me teaching high school. But I loved it. I loved teaching those guys and gals in high school. But in 1997, the state of Texas, it was called the Texas Natural Resource Conservation Commission back then. It's the governing agency. It's the TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. They oversee our licensing program. They made it a rule that you had to have a 36-hour irrigation course before you could take the exam. And you also had to have continuing education credits every so often to keep your license current. And that's when I got into the training game. Mr. Tillinghast called me and said, hey, irrigation, you know how to teach, you need to call the state and see about getting approved to teach these classes. So I owe a lot to Mr. Tillinghast. I don't even know where he's at these days, but he's the one that got me started in this process. So I've been teaching irrigation courses since 1997. And man, I tell you, for me personally, I've learned so much from teaching this stuff, and just hearing guys in classes. It's been awesome, actually. So that's kind of how I got into it.
So then, after working in Texas only, you then transitioned to working for Ewing, right?
Yeah,
And then traveling across the U.S. Is that right?
yeah,
And
that's
tell me
right.
about that. What was that like?
Well, that was another kind of eye-opening moment for me. I was doing a lot of training, and Ewing, the distributor, uh, they were sending people to me to. There was no training. I mean, this is like 15, maybe 18 years ago. there was no way you could go and get any kind of training. So the Ewing people were like, we're going to send our guys to this guy in Texas, who happened to be me, and we want our guys to get some sort of foundational training so that when they go to sell stuff, they know a little bit more about what they're talking about, right? So I was their outside sales guys were coming in and their managers were coming in. Well, eventually they offered me a job doing this training for them in other states that they served. So I took a job with them, and I ended up being their education director. And a group of us did classes for contractors on just all things irrigation. And so once I got involved with those guys, I was doing classes from Oregon down to California, all the way across to Florida, North Carolina, pretty much everywhere in the southern states, Colorado. And so I've done training all over the place. And man, I learned a lot more doing that, because everybody kind of makes the same mistakes, but man, it's different. When you go up into Kansas and they're pulling poly, and down here in Texas, that was foreign to me. So I learned there was a lot of different ways to do this. Winterization for us was just dig deeper, but digging deep was 18 inches. That was plenty good where I was doing my irrigation work at. But then I run across some guys up in Kansas, and they're like, man, you can't dig deep enough. And so then I learned how they winterize systems and all that kind of stuff. So it was definitely an eye opener for me doing this training in the other states. So I did that for about 15 years.
Nice. Yeah, man. I think that like what you do is so important for the industry, because there's so many people, including myself, who just learning on the job, sort of at the whim of whoever happens to be their supervisor or a technician that they're training under, and then they learn the same way, and so much information just gets lost in the transition, and you don't know what you don't know. So people
That's
like
right.
you are like, what you do is just so important for the industry. So when you were traveling for Ewing, what what did you notice was the weak points um, for a lot of technicians? Was it electrical, or was it working with the poly or PVC, or was it more copper work, valves?
Um, it was electrical and uh, hydraulics, pressure issues. They just never truly. I don't want to say never truly. Most of the technicians just had a hard time grasping the hydraulics of everything, and meaning why are you using 3/4 inch pipe? Why, the number one myth in irrigation that I have found to be out there is that you go down in pipe size to squeeze out more pressure. And that was prevalent off from coast to coast. And so you're talking to these guys and you're saying, hey, the only reason you're buying 1/2 inch pipe is because it's cheaper than 3/4 inch pipe. There is no advantage other than economics to using the 1/2 inch. And it threw a lot of guys off, because they were like, no, you got to have that 1/2 inch pipe to squeeze that water out of that last head. And, so that was kind of and then just adding flow, how adding flow doesn't just add a little bit of loss. If you double your flow in a piece of pipe, your loss in that piece of pipe is almost 4 times greater. So when you can't just keep adding heads and it adds a little bit of pressure loss. It adds a lot. And if we go onto Google Earth right now and we looked at all the football fields of, all these little small communities and even big cities, you're going to see the pressure issues from satellite. So that is one of the biggest problems, is understanding just the pressure requirements. But the thing about going down in pipe size, I figured out an analogy. That's one thing about the training, is the use of analogies I found to be the best thing, and kind of I don't know. I really fall back on analogies a lot. But if it was true that you could go down in pipe size to generate more pressure, Wouldn't the fire department be rolling up 1/4-inch tubing the next time they fight a fire? They wouldn't have these giant fire hoses. They would have 1/4-inch tubing and no need to have a pump. Just get that 1/4-inch tubing out there and let it rip. But so that was number one. Number two was electrical. Yeah, not knowing how to use a volt ohm meter. I don't fault anybody about that because I certainly didn't know how to use it at first. And what I would see guys do in the field is that they were just relying on the voltage, trying to make voltage readings in the field. And really, if you want to troubleshoot something, a conventional system, 80% of that can be diagnosed with the ohms using just the ohm readings, because that tells you a ton of information. And they just hadn't heard that. And that was kind of the number one. And then number two is that I would get guys that had been in the industry for like 2 weeks, and they're in class with a guy that had been in there for, in the industry for 10, 15 years. And just the diversity of knowledge was so great in those classes. And I did find that, man, when I'm training a group that's that diverse, you break everything down to the basics right off the bat and then work your way up. Don't assume that your student knows things, and stop using acronyms, stop using abbreviations, stop calling things, don't necessarily call the controller a Pro C or a HydroWise or, a ESP or whatever brand you're in love with. Call it a controller, because once you start using acronyms and stuff like that, you lose. They're trying to figure out what those abbreviations mean, and you've already moved on 5 topics further. So use regular terminology, use the entire pressure vacuum breaker. Don't just start calling it a PVB right off the bat. So from just terminology, yeah, for the new guys, just knowing the terms of the industry was an issue.
So you mentioned, do use analogy, don't use acronyms. What other methods and techniques have you found to be useful in making training as effective as possible for technicians?
You have to start off with, you need a curriculum and a lesson plan. Just like with any other thing that you're trying to achieve, any other kind of goal, you need to have your goals and a plan to reach that goal. Same thing with a training class. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to teach these guys how to, troubleshoot a system. You've got to be really specific with your lesson plan. So everything starts with that. The curriculum is just basically your outline, your blueprint, but the lesson plan is going to have your learning objectives in it. So the way you start off a training in any way is to say, in your mind, or I have it literally written down, I will say, upon completion of this session, of this module, of this class, the student will be able to blank. I start every lesson off like that. And you can't say, upon completion of this class, the student will be able to know 2-wire. That is not a defined objective that you can measure. It has to be, upon completion of this class, the learner will be able to demonstrate the use of a milliamp clamp or demonstrate the use of a volt ohm meter. Having that directs my entire class. If you are going to have to demonstrate how to use a volt ohm meter, that means when I teach you, I've got to have volt ohm meters there. I've got to have some sort of setup that you can go in and do the tests. And I got to see that you do it. I got to show it to you. I got to let you do it. So what I found to be one of the most effective things is, first off, don't answer all the questions. I will see guys in class that answer all the questions. They'll ask a question and they'll answer it before people have a chance to get an answer. So if you're doing a group setting, one of the best things to do is to say, okay, so let's say you want to know what is going to be the pressure loss at the critical head. If you just ask that question to a group, your extroverts are going to answer all the questions. The guys that like to talk and aren't, extroverts think while they're talking. Those guys are going to answer those questions. You need to say, I want everybody to write down on a piece of paper what they think the critical head pressure is going to be for this system, whatever the question is. Make everybody participate. That gives the introvert a chance to just kind of think about it and write his answer down. And then from there, I will say, okay, I want you to group. I normally have everybody have a partner or two. And I'll say, okay, share your answer with your partner. And then y'all debate on who has the right answer. If you don't have the same answer, debate on who's right. Let them teach themselves. That is one of the best things I've ever done in training, is quit trying to take control of everything. Present the question, let them come up with their own answer, show it to somebody, and now I've got to prove to you why my answer is right and why your answer is wrong, and you've got to do the vice versa. And so I'm like, hey, yours is wrong because you got to do A, B, C, and D. And you would be like, well, no, mine's actually right because you forgot this particular step. Man, when you force people to think like that, that's when the learning actually takes place. You have to force people to think, because our brains are designed to go on to autopilot as fast as possible, right? When I drove home the other day, I don't even know how I got home half the time. I just got in and drove. I don't think about it. And so your brain does everything it can to not think. So you got to do things to make people think. So that's one of the best techniques, I think, is that right there.
Yeah, that's genius, man. So what does the actual training consist of? Are you showing them how things work? Are you telling them how things work? Are you using video? Are you showing them something and then having them do it?
A combination. Most of the people do not learn by reading on their own. Okay. Certainly there's people that do that, but not in our industry, or they wouldn't be in this industry. We're hands-on people. So when I get a training from somebody, or when I see somebody do training, and it's basically their idea of training is, read this book and then let me know if you have any questions. I'm like, that is not training, man. Even on a video's the same way. You can send somebody a video and say, okay, well, just watch this. Now you can learn a lot. The video is nice because you're seeing somebody actually do the skill. YouTube, I've learned a lot from YouTube, as everybody has. If I wanted to, I don't know, work on my lawnmower, I'm going to YouTube first to see if somebody is showing me step by step. So yes, you have to show, and then you have to have individual practice, make them do it themselves without you. Let them make a mistake. I also coach like a little league, an AAU basketball club. And one of the things I like to do is give them a drill and just kind of explain the drill and let them just go do it. Let them mess up a few times, and don't correct them. Just let them go and see if they self-correct. So same thing on this training. If you're having them as simple as, digging out nice square trenches, have them dig a trench and then and clean it out, or whatever your skill is. Let them do it how they think it should be done. And then just say, okay, now what do you think about that? Make them think about the process and then say, okay, it's going to be better if we do it like this, because, and then you give them the reason, but you force them to try to figure it out themselves first. What is awful is when you take on a job and you're forced to figure out the job and you're really never directed at all. And that's when employees get upset. That's when employees leave, and that's when they get frustrated. I've been in that situation where I've taken on a job and the guy was like, hey, I need you to go do this. And I'm like, how am I supposed to do that? How? I don't know. And I was like, you're going to have to show me how to do this one time. And then, but it's just a lot of anxiety when you're being asked to do something and you're not being shown how to do it. But in our training class, not every time can we go out and install the sprinkler system. So we, obviously we'll use visuals, we'll use some video, we'll have some models to manipulate, and then at the end when we can, we'll go out and we'll actually do some hands-on. When we're doing hydraulic calculations in design, we're doing the literal hydraulic calculations and the design. If we're doing technicians based stuff and we're trying to square off heads and stuff like that, we need to go do a system walkthrough and have them do the inspection, and then we just kind of watch and, okay, you inspect zone number 1 and just let them do it. What do you see that's wrong? What do you think? Don't necessarily start telling them, hey, I want you to look for tilted heads, sunken heads, broken heads. Don't say anything. Just let them go and do it. All this takes time. And so you got to invest time into these guys and gals to do it right. Let them do it. Turn on a zone that you've booby trapped or whatever, and say, okay, I want you to make a punch list of everything that needs to be, what you think needs to be done. And if the guy's like, listen, I don't know any of this stuff. Well, but you do. You've seen a shower head work before. Take a wild guess. Your guess can't be wrong. And then when he makes a wild guess and it's wrong, ask them, tell me what your process was that you came to that answer right there. I'm not trying to embarrass them or anything. You just want to kind of know how they're thinking. And then you might find out that they don't really understand the relationship between flow and pressure. And now you need to kind of back up and be like, hey, water doesn't work like that. Water's going to find the path of least resistance and ABC, and, so kind of let them make a mistake. If I'm teaching guys that know too much for their own good, I will booby trap them, and I will try to make them right off the bat. Like I will do continuing education classes these are irrigators that have been in the business for 10, 15, 20 years. So I liked in that setting, I like to give them a scenario. Let's say we're just doing a water windows or I don't know, irrigation run times. I will just say, okay, you're at a job site. You need to put in you need to program the clock. What are you going to program the clock at? And then I just stop. And then they're like, well, you need to know this. Okay. You need to know what the grass, what the plant material is. I'll start telling them what it is. Okay. You have grass. Now what are you going to do? And I make them do that process. And what I find on classes like that is that they will list all these things that you do need to know, textbook, what you're supposed to have. But then I'll also turn around and ask them, now, are you telling me you do all this? If that homeowner was looking over your shoulder, or would you just set the clock for Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 12 minutes for sprays and 30 minutes for rotors? And they all default to like, well, yeah, that's what we would do. Okay, but you know that's not the way. So I try to make those guys think about it first again. And I've been teaching this stuff for 30 years. I've been in the industry for 30 years. Man, every time I will learn something. I'll learn something from a guy that's just walked off, just got out of high school, because nowadays they have so much technology. I'm showing them how to measure something. And they're like, why don't you just use this device right here that you can just clip here, here, and here, and it tells you the whole. I didn't know anything about it, man. Teach me. But the student has to be ready for the teacher. When I was being taught by Mr. Tillinghast in college, I was not teachable. Not on purpose, not by disrespect. I was just unteachable because I didn't want to do this for the rest of my life. I was going to go coach. I was going to go teach. So, man, but once I was ready to be taught, I did learn a lot. So sometimes there is a situation where, maybe a guy isn't teachable because he doesn't see this as a fulfilling career. So I guess you need to in that case, you need to give them a reason to want to be in the industry and work for you. So, gotta have some buy-in.
So let's say you have someone, they have no experience. Are you gonna, how are you gonna structure the training program? Are you gonna say, like, break it all down into subsections? Or are you gonna, is it gonna be more like, okay, we're gonna go through like installing a zone. So we're going to start with a shutoff and then a backflow, and this is what a backflow does, and this is what a electric valve does. Are you going to go through it that way? Or are you going to start with a list of definitions? Or are you going to break it into subsections or maybe something else?
I start off with a general overview of the whole thing, right? I start off with a general overview and of an entire, this is what we're trying to achieve. So in the, we're talking irrigation, but it could be outdoor kitchens or whatever. So I'm just going to stick with irrigation, but I'm going to say, listen, this is, in essence, this is what an irrigation system is composed of, and this is how it works. And I'll just kind of just, in generalities, so, we have a point of connection, we have a head at the end, we need that head to do that right there. And in order to do that, we're going to end up losing pressure along the way. And so the whole name of the game is to control our pressure loss so we still have enough pressure at the head. That head needs 30 psi. The source is giving us 60. How much can we lose? And they'll be staring at me sometimes. And so then I'll stop and I will say, you need $30 at the end of the day. Mama gives you $60 to start the day. How much money can you spend? Just analogies. But I give them an overview, and then after that, we break it into modules. So if it was if I was doing this for a company, I would be like, okay, what's this entry level guy supposed to? What's his first job set? Is he just going to be, trenching? And if that's the case, that's his first module is based on how he moves up in the company. I'm not going to start a guy brand new on programming clocks and stuff like that. We're going to start off by doing, how to properly dig a trench. You might think there's not much to dig in a trench, but there really is. Now, I guess you're trying to toe a line between, training somebody, and then you don't want to make them think that you think they're dumb or anything, but there is something to dig in a trench. If there's a cable underneath there, you don't want to cut that trench perpendicular to the cable. You want to go parallel so you can minimize the likelihood of you cutting the line. And it's just little stuff like that. I mean, if you've never been doing this stuff, why would you even think about that? Well, I think about that because I've cut my fair share of cable lines and whatnot. You don't have to go through that. I'm going to teach you how to dig this trench properly. So I would take modules based on what their job sets are in my company. So I'm not going to start off with a controller programming. I would start off with, adjusting heads, setting heads, how to nozzle a head, how to flush them out. I was at a job site the other day. They had it's their first time to start doing irrigation. The owner wanted me to kind of come out and just kind of watch them and just give him an evaluation. So as we got going, they were about to make the cross connection and they needed some help. So I was helping the guy make the cross connection, showing him kind of how to handle that. And that was going to be his job. So we talked our way through it, and I was showing him how, and I had him do it and this and that. But while we were doing this, the other 4 guys were all over there digging out a valve box. 4 guys to dig out one valve box hole. And I keep watching them, and then the same 4 guys went over here and they started running the drip line. And then the same 4 guys did this and did that. And I was like, hey, man, you just, people need to take time to watch their crews and be able to. So then at the end, it wasn't really my position, but I went ahead and talked to those guys. I said, listen, you guys got to become more efficient. We can't have 4 guys digging a hole. 2 of y'all, maybe. The other 2 should have been running this drip line, and the other 2 should have been doing this. And, but that's I guess that's what I was there to do is to give them processes and give everybody jobs to do. interestingly enough, one of the four guys said, well, but we were able to dig it faster because there was four of us digging this. Yeah. No, that's not true. I guarantee one of y'all would have dug it just. It would have been nice. Let's say it would have taken you a little bit longer. Those other two should have been having the drip line laid and having a process. But gotta have processes. Gotta have processes, and that's your company has to have processes, and then people are going to be put into those positions to conduct those processes, and that is your module. That's your training module. What is this first process? How does it get done? That's a module. Once that is done, what is the next process? That's a module. And now I got two processes happening at the same time. Once those two done, well, that's your next module. So you figure out your process and then you create modules based on those. That's how I would do it.
And how about so they go, you have your process, you have a technician go through this particular subsect of your training, and then do you quiz on that? Do you quiz on that once? Do you quiz on that every year? Or what does that look like as far as ensuring that they know what they're doing and that they're following the procedures?
I'm a big fan of checking for understanding. So yes, I would quiz them, test them. You could create your own in-house certifications if you wanted to. That's a good way, but in order to do that, you need to pass. You got to show competency. So that competency is either in the form of a written exam or a hands-on demonstration that they could do, or a combination. There is no license out there. There's no certification out there that you can get without showing some sort of competency through examination and or demonstration. So I'm a big believer in that. And then you can gamify the stuff if you want. There's stuff out there called Kahoot. It's a software package out there that's online that school teachers use. And you're basically gamifying all these questions. You could do it like that. If you didn't want like an official certification, you could have, okay, I want you to do this Kahoot game. Oh, there's 3 of y'all or 4 of y'all. And you basically, you could gamify it. You could have a day every year where it's just kind of a skills day where, yeah, I got this company, I've got these crews. This day is always our skills day, and we're going to have competitions where they have to demonstrate that skill in the form of a competition. Winner gets this. You can have it where you're training them and it doesn't feel like they're getting trained. And have some barbecue and have a good time about it and have some door prizes. You could set it up for your winter time or whatever it makes sense. But you need to have ongoing training sessions and reinforcement for sure. It's a state law for us that if you have a license, you have to have continuing education. I think it's a good for every company to have their own version of that for sure. Yes, I'm 100% for that.
And so what should the ongoing training look like? Would you recommend having like a predetermined training session? Like it's going to be an hour-long training session, and 3 months from now, I could tell you what we're going to do on the Wednesday, the 27th, or should it be more flexible and based on what your technicians are encountering, or what does that look like? The ongoing training.
I think you have the modules already created for the different processes, but then you're definitely flexible because you're going to get a crew of guys that might be struggling with a certain area. So you got to be willing to be flexible. Not everybody's the same for sure. So the ongoing training, if you want to have like in the first 6 months of your employment, you got to do A, and then by the end of the year, you need to be able to do B. That's good. What I find the problem with that is if it is too reliant on self-paced instruction. Like I've got 6 months to go through all these training modules that they've created for me online, and I've got to do this. I'm just not going to be as motivated as a employee to do that. And I know a lot of guys do that. I don't think that's the best way. I think, listen, on Wednesday of first Wednesday of the month is we got a training session, and today we're going to do this subject. So you can have something like that every month where it's you're highlighting a product, highlighting a skill set. You can put a guy or two from your company in charge of that. You don't have to do everything, but I think you have that in addition to having maybe showing some sort of training that happens every 6 months or something. But I can see the benefits of having self-paced modules that people go through, but I just don't think they're as successful as saying, okay, listen, on Friday, I'm going to take this group of guys and we're going to go through this module together. And I'm going to be there to answer your questions. I'm going to be there. You're going to take time from work to do it. You're not going to do it on your own time. I think I just think it's wrong for an employer to think that a guy's going to work for you for 40 hours a week or more, and then he's supposed to do some extra work on the side, doing training modules on his own time. I know when I'm done for the day, I'm done for the day, and I want to hang it up just like everybody else gets to hang it up. So if I want to have that training like that, I need to provide a window of opportunity for that individual to do that, and maybe I need to be in there assisting and helping to make sure it gets done, or whoever my education training guy is.
Do you think it's better to start a new technician on install or service if you offer both and in a residential context?
Well,
just in terms of learning,
my immediate answer was install. My immediate answer is install. So let's say in a residential setting, I think it would be better for him to be on an installation crew to see it go in from start to finish, see everything exposed, in open trenches, see how it's glued together, see how all the components work together, see how the main line gets to the valve and the valve goes out. I think that is better. And now when he goes from there into the service side, he can troubleshoot that easier because he knows how a system is supposed to go in. And so when he sees something that doesn't seem right, he could be, okay, now if we were installing this, that main line would have come this way. So it's probably, I think it's better to be on the install side before you just jump into the other, because the service side, I think, is much harder. There's so many different things that can go wrong on the service side. You never know what a guy was doing, and he covered it up with dirt. And so you can't see what he did. So you got to have a lot of experience to be a good service tech. And when you have a good service tech, man, you need to keep him because it's hard to do. So that's a good question. I think I would definitely start them on the install side. Yeah. Interesting.
Tell me about Bloom's taxonomy and how you.
Well, it's one of those things like digging a trench. You don't think it's that important, but it's super important. So when you're training someone and you're creating a lesson plan, you need actionable verbs that you're going to check. So it goes back to this, when upon completion of this module, the student should be able to blank. And if it's just know how to adjust a head, that there's nothing that I can test on that. But if I say upon completion of this module, the student will be able to select the correct nozzle for a head and install it correctly. Okay, that tells me that select was the verb. Demonstrate is the verb. And these different verbs, if I use a verb like he needs to define what a head is, so my verb is define. That's the lower on the Bloom's taxonomy of learning, it's a pyramid, and the base of the pyramid is just rote knowledge. If you don't have knowledge, rote memorization type knowledge, if you don't know definitions, you can't move up the pyramid to comprehend what the stuff is and what it can do. After comprehension, you have analysis. You can't analyze something and figure out what's wrong with it unless you can first understand the verbiage, then comprehend what the verbiage means, which means you need to show that you have the ability to comprehend something. You have to, the verb I would use in this case would be, the student should restate how pressure is lost in a system. The student should use an analogy about how pressure is lost. So if you can use an analogy like, when I'm going down, when water's flowing down the pipes, you lose gallons per minute. It's kind of like going down you got a bus and you're losing, people get off the bus, and now, so I had 10 gallons a minute. It went out of a head that with 2 gallons a minute, I continue on with 8 gallons a minute. We'll use an analogy. Okay, well, I got a bus with 10 people on the bus, 2 people get off, 8 people keep on going. Now I have demonstrated that I can restate. So the base of the pyramid is just knowledge. So you got to make sure you're doing all the definitions. The student should be able to define what design pressure means, define what a pressure vacuum breaker is. And then you move up to comprehension, and then you move up to analysis. And so those verbs help you with your lesson plan, and it helps you with the level of student that you're dealing with. If I've got a guy that's been in the industry for 15, 20 years, I don't have to spend time on the base talking about what PVB stands for. I can immediately move up to, okay, let's use a PVB and let's go to the number 1 test cock and let's put on a pressure gauge, and we're going to do, I can move up the pyramid much faster with that guy. But if I've got that guy in the same class with a new guy, I cannot talk like that. I've got to go back down here, and I've got to make sure he understands the verbiage I'm saying before I can advance up the pyramid. And so that you can look up Bloom's taxonomy, and you can get a list of verbs, and they are so helpful in creating an effective lesson plan. They really are. I can't. It's one of those weird things that I can't not express enough. But yes.
Yeah, no, I love it, man, because like you're so deliberate with the way that you go about training, whereas I think that I mean, that's just not happening within most irrigation companies, even though everyone wants to be able to take a technician from ground zero to, full blown technician in their own truck generating revenue. But it's like, this is what it takes. It's like you have to be really deliberate about how you go about imputing that knowledge into someone. So with that being said, do you start a lesson assuming it's new to someone with definitions, like this is a ball valve, this is a backflow preventer? Yeah.
I start every class the same way. I say, look, I'm gonna teach this class the way I would want it to be taught to me, and I don't want someone to assume that I know this stuff. Just start from square one, and as you check for understanding, as an instructor, you realize, everybody already has this down. Then you can quickly move up. But I will start off, okay, this is a ball valve and this is a gate valve. Both of them are isolation valves, but this is a ball valve and this is a gate valve. Why is this one used sometimes and this one used sometimes? So although I might hold up a ball valve and they're like, yeah, I know that's a ball valve. And I might hold up a gate valve and they're like, yeah, I know that's a gate valve. Why would I pick one over the other? Why would they make two different ones? What? And then now we start moving up there's a lot to a ball valve and a gate valve when you really start to think about it. When you get to these big, large systems, you don't see 12-inch ball valves. You don't see a 3-inch ball valve, because you can just go boom, and all of a sudden you slam it shut. Well, now we got a discussion about hammer and the damaging effects of water hammer on a system, when I can talk about a gate valve and how I don't care how fast you are, a gate valve is a slow close. And so it eliminates hammer. But it's also metal on metal. And metal on metal will wear down and leak over time. And you just go on. And so there's a lot to this stuff. And so there's reasons why they make ball valves and gate valves. And so to be able to explain that to people, but yes, absolutely. I will hold up a ball valve and I will say, this is a ball valve. Look, check it out. There's a ball inside. And I'll pass it around. And if I get the general feeling like these guys are like, yeah, okay, yeah, no kidding, that's a ball valve, then I'll just start asking questions. Now, why would you pick that over this? Well, because these don't work. Why don't they work? That's not an answer for me, And why don't we use, it just goes on and on. So, but yeah, I definitely will start like you're saying. I will show them the product. And if I can't bring in the product physically, I will show it on the PowerPoint or whatever. It's good to have visuals. If you can't have the actual model there, then yes, have a visual, have a picture, have a video of it or something. Yes, 100%. Or go outside. Go outside is even better. The problem with going outside is that you take 5 people outside and then they just start. It's really hard to do an outside class with a group. You would think we really need to go outside with 10 guys and we need to install a system. 3 of them will be doing the hands-on part. If you're going to do something like that, you really got to have a team leader that knows what their role is, and then they're in charge of 3 or 4 guys, and then they make those 3 or 4 guys each do a task. Otherwise, if you're out there with 10 guys, you're going to have 3 or 4 step up and do it, and you're just going to have guys standing in the back and looking over their shoulder. There's not as much learning going on in that setup as people think. So you really got to be even more organized if you're going to do something like that.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. What resources would you recommend for learning the technical aspect of irrigation? And what resources, books or podcasts, websites, whatever it may be, do you have on becoming a better teacher?
Oh, okay. So YouTube is obviously there for everybody, man. There's so much on YouTube. But as far as like literature for technicians, is that what the first question was?
Yep.
There are if you're a kind of a self-paced guy, because Texas has a required program, you can get some good training from instructors in Texas because we had to develop programs for the state. So like my training company is called Water Educational Training Services. Now, most of our modules that we create are for the Texas licensing. So sometimes, there is a Texas slant on things, but we will talk about, we will have like modules online that people can go through. Rainbird and Hunter have some really nice modules about their product that show how to do this. Your distributors, the Ewings, I used to do videos for Ewing and I'm Site One, all these guys, whatever brand distributor, whatever distributor you want to use, a lot of them have good information, but you got to go digging through it. You got to go through the websites. I don't know of a place that you just go a one-shop stop to get all that stuff. Even the IA, the Irrigation Association, they have some stuff you can go through, but I'm not a big fan of self-study, because I just feel like, when I taught high school, again, I love teaching high school, but there was a group of people in the back row that were sitting there like, why do I need to know this stuff? And when I'm throwing a chemistry book in front of them, and they open it and they're like, I just can't do this. That same kid is now a grown man in this industry. So it's hard for me to throw him a book on hydraulics and get him to know it. I think a good hands-on seminar class is pretty awesome. The one bad thing I would say about the Texas program is that our classes, the state requires an 8-hour it's 24 hours of continuing education in a 3-year period. So all of our classes are 8 hours long. It's an 8-hour day. After about 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's pointless to keep going. That's what I learned when I was doing the training in other states for Ewing, where I was not bound by a state requirement. We would do those classes till lunch and call it good. The longer classes, we would go for about 6 hours. We would stop at around 1-2 o'clock. After about 2 o'clock, you just got to call it quits, man. We just don't have the mind can only take what the butt can endure. And when you've been sitting on your butt for 6 hours, you kind of want to leave. So a good short little, 4-hour burst, and then get away from it, and then come back with another 4-hour burst. On the training side, where you would get that information, me personally, I just dug into it because I was going to be a teacher. So I wanted to be good at it. So back then, the online wasn't a thing. So I just got a lot of books about teaching, and I'm a big fan about how the brain works, and I will get books on that and presentation skills. Get anything you can get your hands on presentation skills, because when you're reading those books and you're listening to those people, the TED Talks on presentation skills, they say the exact same things. You need to have a plan. You need to have, you need to have organization. And I found that to be the case.
So water educational training systems, is that right?
Yeah. WETS, WETS.
WETS. Can't forget it. What's that?
You can go to wetscourses.com, and that's a list of all of our courses. Now, obviously, the live classes are sitting here in Texas, but we do have online webinar type trainings, where our big full-blown course is 5 days, 8 to 5, 5 days in a row. When you complete that, you're eligible to go take the state exam in Texas if you want to. We also, though, have webinars like this week I'll be doing a webinar training on irrigation auditing. A few weeks ago, I did one on electrical troubleshooting. And then a few weeks ago, I did one on hydraulic troubleshooting pressure issues. So we do have webinars that we do periodically. I have some self-paced stuff, but again, I have it because people request it, but I'm not a big fan of it. The webinars are awesome because there'll be like 10, 20 people on the screen from all parts of, most of them are from Texas, but I'll have a guy from Massachusetts or Ohio. There'll just be a random guy. And it's just always interesting to get those perspectives. And you'll realize, man, I'm not in my own little world struggling. I'll tell you another good one is what is that Facebook group? It's called Irrigation Tech Talk or something like that. I don't know if you check that out, but that thing is hilarious to me because guys will post their work and then they just get ridiculed by all the comments. So I don't know if that's really where you want to get your learn on, but it's pretty good to check that out. There's some good ideas that come through, but there's some bad ideas that come through there too. So gotta be careful.
Yeah, you get a vast range of opinions for sure.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of good information in there. That's for sure. There's a lot of stuff in between as well. Well, man, it was a pleasure talking with you. I really appreciate it, and I have a ton of takeaways that I'm going to be using in my business. So thank you very much, man. I can't say how much I appreciate your time.
I definitely appreciate you having me on here, man. It's been fun for me, for sure.
Absolutely. All right. You have a good one.
Yes, sir. Thank you.